Hello, my name is Kim and I am here to tell you a spooky story. Before we get into that, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's dive back into the horrors of Camp Nevermore. Chapter 5, Dinner with Echoes. Zach woke to a sky the color of unbrushed teeth. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the air still clung damp and heavy, like it hadn't decided whether to turn to mist or fog or just settle in as silence. The world outside the cabin was gray and still, and for a moment, Zach thought maybe time had stopped completely. He sat up slowly, peeling the blanket off, half expecting to find ashes on his chest. There weren't any. The photo was gone. Not just burnt, gone. Not a trace on the floor. No scent of smoke. No scorch mark on the wood. Only memory. And even that felt like it was beginning to slip. Zach stood and stretched, his joints popping. He glanced up at the top bunk. Jules was already awake, sitting with his back to the wall, legs pulled in, staring out the window. Zach kept his voice low. "Hey, you good?" Jules didn't look at him. "I had a dream." Zach paused. "Yeah, I was standing in the mess hall." Jules said slowly. "Only it was empty. And then it was full. Like, too full. Everyone was talking, but all the voices were mine." Zach felt a chill climb up the back of his neck. Jules rubbed his eyes. "I think I was everyone. Or everyone was me." Then, as if flipping a switch, Jules stood and stretched like nothing was wrong. "Well, time to brush teeth and pretend we didn't almost get absorbed into the nightmare ether." Zach blinked. "You're just fine now?" Jules gave him a sideways smile. "I've got a theory. It's only scary if we admit it's real." Helpful. They got ready in silence. Zach's hoodie felt slightly damp, like the air had sunk into the fabric overnight. He shoved his notebook into the pocket anyway, just in case. At the outdoor sinks near the latrines, campers stood brushing their teeth in almost perfect sync. Elbows moved the same. Heads tilted the same. The only sound was the slow crunch of gravel and the squelch of water from metal pipes. Zach tried to brush like normal, but behind him, somewhere in the trees, came a sound. A voice. Zach. His name. Again. Not loud. Not close. But aimed. Like it had a target. He stopped brushing. Turned. Nothing there. Just pine trunks and morning fog, and the faint rustle of leaves that didn't move. When he looked back, 3 kids were staring at him. He didn't know any of them. They weren't smiling. One of them tilted his head the exact way Amber had tilted hers. Jules stepped beside him with a spit and a grin. "Today's gonna be great. Can't you feel it?" Zach looked at the forest one more time, and felt exactly what he shouldn't have. Watched. By late afternoon, the sky had brightened, but not in the usual way. It wasn't cheerful. It was sharp, bleached, like the light had been scrubbed too hard and lost its warmth. Everything outside looked overexposed, the colors wrong, too yellow, too white. The bell rang early. Not the dinner bell, not the free time chime. A new one, high, tinny, and fast, like someone had given a child a cowbell and a mission. "Campers, report to the mess hall." A voice shouted across the clearing. Surprise celebration. All cabins, all counselors, all smiles. Zach and Jules exchanged a look. "I don't like surprises," Zach muttered. "I do," Jules said, "but only the kind with cake." The mess hall was already half full by the time they arrived. Long tables had been pushed to the edges of the room, opening up a wide space in the center, like a stage. Bright paper lanterns hung from the rafters, swinging gently even though there was no breeze. Fold-out chairs had been set in tidy rows. A banner stretched over the fireplace. "Nevermore night. Remember to forget." Zach stared at it. "What kind of camp slogan is that?" "The kind where people disappear, probably," Jules said. Counselor Reed stepped into the center of the room, wearing a red sash and an enormous grin. The room hushed immediately. "Welcome, wonderful campers," Reed said, his voice perfectly pitched, like he was reading from a cue card inside his skull. "Tonight is a very special occasion. A night to honor tradition. A night to reflect. and forget. He gave an exaggerated wink. No one laughed. Jules whispered, "I think we're at a cult meeting." "Sure." Reed clapped, and the other counselors, 3 of them, walked in holding cardboard props, trees, a campfire, a lake made of shiny blue fabric. They began the skit. It was bizarre. A puppet with googly eyes and a crooked grin, supposedly a camper named Danny, refused to follow the camp rules. He wandered off the trail, drank from the wrong water, talked to things that echoed him. He laughed and danced and refused to listen until the forest hugged him too tightly, and he melted into a pile of gray felt and smoke. "Don't worry," a puppet counselor chirped. "Danny's still with us. Forever." A counselor in the back rang a bell. Some campers clapped. Most just watched blank-eyed. Zach scanned the room. Something was wrong. Too many campers. He counted again. The cabins shouldn't hold this many kids. Not even close. Then a girl laughed, and her voice doubled. For a moment, 2 identical laughs overlapped from different directions. Zach's stomach twisted. He looked at Jules. Still beside him. Still silent. Still watching. But then, another voice. From the far side of the room. Same tone. Same rhythm. Same joke he'd just whispered in Zach's ear. Zach turned slowly. At the far table sat another Jules. Same hoodie. Same glasses. Smiling just slightly. Not looking at him, but looking at someone. Someone else. Someone not real. Zach stared at the Jules across the room. Same hoodie. Same socks. Same posture. Leaning back slightly, one ankle over a knee. Fingers drumming a rhythm Jules always claimed he just made up. But the real Jules was still beside him. Breathing. Watching the puppet show with vague disinterest. Zach whispered, "Look to your left." Jules turned his head slightly, then froze. Zach saw it in the tension of his shoulders, the breath caught in his throat. He was staring at himself. The echo across the room smiled, just for a second, then looked away, like it hadn't been caught, like it wanted to be caught. "Don't react," Zach said quietly. "Just watch." Jules didn't answer. His hands gripped the edge of his chair, knuckles going white. Zach looked around the room again. It wasn't just Jules. A girl across the aisle blinked. Once, and then again, a split second later. Her body shimmered slightly, as if the second blink had come from inside a reflection. Another camper picked up his spoon, stirred his lemonade, then picked it up again, and stirred it the exact same way. Like a glitch in a video game. Like a loop trying to restabilize. Then came the singing. The counselors began chanting, not quite a melody, but not a poem either. It sounded old. Too old. Something about roots and names and how a shadow held in a mouth becomes a song. Campers began to join in. Some knew the words. Zach didn't. Neither did Jules. But the echo across the room did. It mouthed the chant, perfect and calm. Voice moving just half a second behind the real Jules, like a delayed broadcast. Zach stood abruptly. The real Jules caught his arm. "Sit down." "No. Don't make them see you see them." Zach's heart thudded against his ribs. One of the counselors walked past, humming the chant with a blank, blissful look. Zach whispered, "That thing looks just like you." "Not just like me," Jules said, low and shaking. "Exactly like me. It even has my lucky shoelace. I tied it this morning." Zach looked down. So did Jules. The real Jules had a frayed green shoelace on his left boot, knotted in his weird loophole style. And so did the thing across the room. Down to the knot. Down to the fray. "What are they?" Zach whispered. Jules didn't answer. Then the lights went out. All at once. No flicker. Just darkness. And a voice rang out. Counselor Reed, still cheerful in the pitch black. "Campers, now it's time for the choosing." The darkness wasn't normal darkness. It was thick, close, like being sealed inside someone else's breath. Zach couldn't see his own hands. Couldn't hear Jules breathing beside him. couldn't even tell which direction was which anymore. All around him, the room had gone deathly still. Then clap. One single, deliberate clap. Counselor Reed's voice rang out, cheerful and precise. Campers, time for the choosing. Please stay seated while we conduct tonight's identity realignment. Someone giggled. A light, tinny sound from too close. Too high-pitched to be a kid. Zach felt the air shift beside him. Someone moved. He reached out, touched fabric. Jules. No answer. A beat passed. Then the lights flickered on. Fast and blinding. Everyone squinted. Zach blinked hard and stared straight ahead. Two Juleses stood side by side in the center of the mess hall. Identical. One looked confused, breathing hard, fists clenched at his sides. The other stood still, arms at ease, eyes calm. Zach's heart jumped. The real one, the real Jules, had to be the one on the left. No, right? His brain scrambled to remember something. Anything. A detail. A test. The counselors stood motionless at the edges of the room, watching like proud parents. The campers sat in perfect silence, eyes fixed forward. Zach stepped into the light. Wait. No. This isn't, he's not. Reed raised a hand gently. Go ahead, Zach. Choose. The calm Jules turned and smiled at him. The other Jules, Zach's Jules, took a step forward, panic flaring in his eyes. Zach, it's me. The calm one echoed. Zach, it's me. Same voice. Perfect. Zach's mouth went dry. He remembered something. Something small. The notebook. Jules always doodled the same way when he was nervous. Zach reached into his hoodie, pulled out the notebook, flipped to the page from the forest. Okay, he said aloud. You both said the exact same thing in the woods. Both Juleses watched him. Zach tapped the page. One of you drew this. He turned the book. The nervous Jules flinched. The calm one stared blankly, not confused, just waiting. Real Jules, Zach said. What was the thing you said about the broken rock? The one on the right hesitated. The one on the left said, it looked like a broken heart that died mid-heartbeat. Zach pointed. That's him. The real Jules exhaled. The other smiled once more, then flickered, just for a second, like a bad TV signal, and vanished. Not into dust, not into ash, just gone, as if it had never been there at all. Counselor Reed clapped again. The campers clapped too, slowly, politely. He beamed. Excellent instinct, Zach. Entertainment and discernment. A very successful demonstration. Zach turned to Jules, who looked ready to collapse. But he whispered, you were right. And Zach, still staring at the empty space where the echo had stood, whispered back, I wish I wasn't. The mess hall lights buzzed overhead, flickering just once more for good measure. The puppet props had been cleared. The banner was gone. Campers shuffled out, as if they'd just sat through a mildly boring talent show. Not a single word about the second Jules. Not a glance. As if the whole thing had been a dream. Zach's dream. Counselor Reed gave Zach a double thumbs up as he passed. Well done, kiddo. Really showed good judgment up there. You've got the eye. Zach didn't respond. Just walked. Jules followed. They didn't speak again until they reached the porch of cabin 3. Zach pushed the door open, let Jules go in first, then stood outside for a moment, watching the trees. The forest didn't move. It waited. Inside, Jules sat on his bunk, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Zach closed the door behind him, quietly. I'm glad you knew, Jules said without looking up. I wasn't sure, Zach admitted. I know. A pause. Zach stepped closer. How did they copy you? How'd they get your shoelace? Your voice? That thing answered just like you. Jules gave a dry laugh. That's the scary part. He looked up at Zach, eyes hollow. What if they didn't copy me, he said. Zach blinked. What? Jules's voice dropped. What if I copied them? Zach's mouth went dry. Jules continued. I don't remember being born. I don't remember arriving. Not really. I remember moments. Glimpses. But what if I started here? What if I was made here? What if I'm not the original? Zack stepped back. Jules didn't follow. He just looked up at him and said, softly, "What if the forest didn't take me away, it gave me back?" Zack sat down on the bunk across from him. He didn't say anything else. He didn't sleep that night. Not really. Chapter 6. Amber's Book of Never. The world before sunrise was the quietest version of itself. No bird calls. No wind. Only the hush of early fog weaving between pine trunks like a slow-moving tide. Zack sat up in his bunk, still dressed, the blanket twisted around his legs. The taste of sleep was heavy on his tongue. Something cold brushed his chest. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out the note. Old paper. Yellowed. Creased. The writing was uneven, as if penned quickly in dim light. The book is still waiting. Meet me at the split tree. He stared at the signature. Amber. She was still here. Still watching. Still remembering. He didn't wake Jules. Partly because he knew Jules needed rest. Partly because he didn't trust the world enough to believe that the Jules in the bunk above him would still be Jules if he tried to explain. Zack slipped out the door. The key chimes outside barely moved. No breeze. The air was thick and still, like it hadn't shifted since the night. He saw the antlers in the trees. The forest path looked wrong in the morning light. The shadows were too long, the light too colorless. He took the narrow trail past the mess hall, past the canoe shack, where no one ever canoed, down toward the forgotten fence. The one so buried in moss it looked like it had grown there. The note hadn't said which trail to take, but he knew. His legs carried him like they remembered the way better than his mind did. Soon, the trees parted, and there it was, the split tree, a huge oak, twisted halfway down the trunk, its tubes peeling apart like a book half-read and forgotten. Amber stood beneath it, same hoodie, same dark eyes, but she looked older now, not taller, not aged, just more tired, more used, like she had been worn thin by time's fingernails. "You came," she said. "You left a note." Amber nodded once. "The forest's trying harder now. You're closer to remembering." "Remembering what?" She looked up at the tree. "That you don't belong in this version." Zack blinked. "What does that mean?" "The camp," she said. "The lake. The cabins. It's not just a place. It's a draft. A version. Every time someone wakes up too much, gets too close, it changes the story. It edits you, or replaces you, or buries you deeper." Zack's throat was dry. "So, what are we in?" "A rewrite," she said. "And the others?" "Some are still real. Some are remembered. Some are already gone." Zack looked at her. "What about you?" Amber's eyes narrowed. "That's why I write everything down." Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small brass key. She held it out. "Come with me," she said. "I'll show you where the forgotten things go." Zack followed Amber, without asking where they were going. He didn't want to know. Not yet. She walked quickly, barefoot, her steps silent on the pine needles. The fog clung low to the ground now, brushing their ankles like curious fingers. She didn't speak for a long time. Not until they were well off the known paths. No lanterns, no signs, no carved stumps or trail markers pretending to be rustic. Just trees. Dense. Towering. Watching. Finally, Amber said, "There used to be more of us." Zack glanced at her. "Campers?" "Campers who noticed," she said. "Ones who remembered. Ones who didn't laugh at the rules. The forest watches them closest. Why? Because they're not playing along." They reached a clearing that wasn't on any map. It was circular, bare of underbrush. Just cold, packed dirt, cracked with old roots and scored with faint shapes, glyphs, maybe. Symbols that made Zach's eyes itch to look at too long. At the center, a metal hatch, half covered in pine needles, rust bleeding around the edges. Amber knelt and brushed it clear. Zach stared. The metal was old, but not rusty the way weather makes metal rust. It looked like it had bled from inside. Amber pulled the key from her pocket again and inserted it into a small, nearly invisible seam in the center. She turned it. There was no click, just a low pulse, like something behind the hatch had exhaled. Then the lock slid open. Amber looked at Zach. "Everything the camp forgets gets sent here," she said. "And everything it wants forgotten, too." She pulled the hatch open. Beneath, a spiral stairwell of rough, damp stone, descending into blackness. Zach stepped forward, and for the first time, the earth beneath him felt like it wasn't made of dirt or roots, but of pages. Pages waiting to be read. The hatch groaned open like it hadn't moved in years. The stairwell below breathed out a cold that didn't belong to summer. It smelled like old paper and wet stone, like rain in a cellar, like a library locked shut and buried too deep. Zach hesitated at the edge, then stepped onto the first stair. It shifted slightly under his weight. Amber followed, pulling the hatch closed above them. Not shut, but lowered, like tucking a lid over a secret. Darkness took them. Not total. Not yet. A thin string of lights ran down the center of the stairwell wall. Small bulbs like pearls under grime, flickering weakly every few feet. They didn't light the way so much as reveal the shape of the dark. The stairs wound downward in slow, tight spirals. Zach counted them as they descended. He lost track after 37. "What is this place?" he asked finally. Amber's voice came back low, barely louder than the stone breathing around them. "A place the camp made, then forgot it made." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to." The walls were rough, but not random. Zach ran his fingers across one. There were carvings, rows and rows of scratched symbols, layered over each other like graffiti. Some looked like names. Others were drawings. Eyes, trees, spirals, crooked stick figures with their mouths X'd out. One phrase repeated, over and over in faint, childlike scrawl. "Remember me. Remember me. Remember me." Zach pulled his hand away. "Why is it all still here?" Amber paused on the steps below. "The camp edits what's seen," she said, "not what's buried." They reached a landing. A heavy steel door. Faded yellow paint across it. "Session locked. Do not open without counselor clearance." Amber didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open. Beyond it, a vault. Long, narrow, ceiling low. The walls lined with shelves. Shelves filled with notebooks, journals, folders, photos, tags. Everywhere Zach looked, the past, stacked, filed, forgotten. He stepped in slowly, feet echoing against the floor. "What is this?" he breathed. Amber touched a shelf lightly. "Everything the forest edits," she said. "Everything people leave behind when they get rewritten." Zach's eyes scanned the rows. There were names on the spines, labels. Some were full names. Some were just initials. Others had been scratched off. He moved deeper into the vault. And there, on the third shelf from the bottom, stuck between two thick red folders, a black notebook. Faded gold letters across the front. Zachary Moreno, Session E. Underneath, "Open if you remember." His fingers touched the cover. It was warm. The notebook felt heavier than it should have. Zach turned it over in his hands. The binding was worn. The spine cracked. The edges of the pages yellowed like something old left too long in the sun. Zachary Moreno, Session E. "Open if you remember." Amber watched from across the room, arms crossed, saying nothing. Zach opened it. The first page was blank. Second page, his handwriting. Absolutely his. The same uneven lowercase. The same way he always looped his Y's like fishhooks. The same smudged left-handed slant. At the top of the page, in bold black ink, "Do not trust the counselors. Do not drink the lemonade. If you wake up twice, stay awake." Below that, maps, hand-drawn, sketched in frantic strokes. Paths through the forest, the mess hall, cabin layouts. A triangle symbol circled multiple times, labeled the tree, the loop, the hole. Zach flipped further. Entries, written in his voice, but with knowledge he didn't remember having. Day 3 again. "I found Jules already here. Same jokes. Same hoodie. Doesn't remember me. Doesn't remember the lake." But the echo tried to mimic him again. I knew it wasn't him because it smiled too wide. Day 4. "I'm losing time. The sun sets, but doesn't rise. The lake is breathing. Don't look at the reflection if it calls your name. It will offer you a story. You can't afford another." Zach flipped faster. More entries. More pages. Each one worse than the last. "You've been here before. You left this book last time. You wrote, 'Don't let me write again.'" His hands trembled. On one page, circled in red marker, "You already escaped once." He looked at Amber. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of mourning. "How long have I been coming here?" Zach asked. Amber didn't answer. Instead, she walked to a corner shelf and pulled down a box labeled DM. She opened it. Inside were fragments, shreds of letters, a name tag with faded ink, a sketch of the echo with antlers, and a smaller notebook, torn in half. Amber handed it to him. The first line inside was scribbled in panic. "If you're reading this, they didn't erase you enough." Zach didn't want to believe the pages were changing, but they were. He turned to one that had been full just moments ago, a dense entry dated Session E, Day 6. Now the ink was thinning, the words smearing like wet paint in slow motion. Paragraphs he had just read a minute ago dissolved mid-sentence. Whole sentences faded out entirely, leaving behind faint indentations in the paper like bruises. Across one page, a sentence had begun to overwrite itself. "You must stay, Awa. You belong to US now. You never left." Zach stepped back. Amber slammed the notebook shut and grabbed his arm. "It's starting." "What is?" She didn't explain. The air in the room thickened. A low vibration began underfoot. Not quite a rumble. A hum, like a voice clearing its throat from beneath the floor. The lights on the stairwell flickered. "Amber, what's happening?" "The forest knows you know," she said, tugging him toward the door. "You've read too far. You've remembered too much. It's trying to rewrite you again. But why erase me?" "Not erase," she snapped. "Rewrite. It can't delete you unless it knows where your edges are. It's trying to make you fit." Zach looked back at the shelves. His journal, the fragments, the other names, everything once forgotten. Amber yanked the hatch door open and shoved him through. "Run." They scrambled up the spiral stairs, 2 at a time, their footsteps echoing against the stone. The lights went out behind them, one by one. A thud echoed from deep below. Zach didn't look back. He reached the top just as Amber threw the hatch open and shoved him into the clearing. The sky had gone dim. Clouds moved too fast. The trees leaned closer than before. She slammed the hatch closed behind them, locked it, breathing hard. She turned to him. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "The entry that told you what you did?" Zach nodded slowly. Amber said, "Good," then pointed at the notebook still clenched in his hand. It was blank now. All of it. Nothing remained but one fresh, handwritten line across the last page. "We know you again." Chapter 7. The Ones Who Stayed Too Long. Zach pushed open the door to cabin 3, still clutching the blank journal. The morning sun poured in through the fog like a flashlight through milk. Everything looked normal, which was the first red flag. Jules sat on his bunk, swinging his legs slightly, humming to himself. The same old camp hoodie, same socks, same Jules. but not quite. Zach stood in the doorway a second too long. Jules looked up. Hey, sleepyhead. Took you long enough. What did you do? Wander off into the woods and have a big soul-searching moment with a pine cone? Zach didn't laugh. Jules kept grinning. Zach walked in slowly, slipping the notebook into his hoodie pocket. You didn't notice I was gone? Jules blinked. Gone. Yeah. Jules shrugged. I figured you were in the bathroom. Or with Amber. You guys have been doing the whole creepy mystery side quest thing lately. Zach watched him closely. You remember last night? Last night? Jules looked up, thinking hard. Too hard. His smile tightened like it was being held in place with strings. We had dinner, he said slowly. We sat by the fire pit after. You told me that awful joke about the raccoon and the vending machine. That was 2 nights ago. Oh, a pause. Yeah, right. Then I guess we played cards. Zach didn't speak. The cabin felt colder than it should have. Jules tilted his head. You okay, dude? You look like you saw a ghost that told you your social security number. Zach sat down on the bunk across from him. I saw you. Jules raised an eyebrow. Last night, Zach continued, I saw you standing by the lake. Only you weren't you. Jules didn't answer. Zach leaned forward slightly. What did the carvings say above the hatch? Jules blinked. Hatch. In the woods. A longer pause this time. Then Jules smiled again, too fast. Man, you've been watching too many horror movies in your sleep. There's no hatch. This isn't lost. Zach stood, walked to the window, looked out. The forest was still. He didn't turn around when he said, the real Jules would have made fun of me for trying to be mysterious. But he'd still ask about the carvings. He wouldn't just smile and change the subject. Behind him, Jules laughed once. Soft. Measured. I mean, maybe you're right, he said. Maybe I'm just off today. Zach turned back around. Jules was still smiling, still swinging his legs, still looking just right. But now Zach was certain something inside that skin was wrong. Lunch was quieter than it should have been. No clutter, no jokes, no yelling counselors trying to wrangle tray lines. The mess hall buzzed in a low, unnatural way, as if the sound was coming from inside the walls instead of the campers. Zach sat at a corner table with Amber. He hadn't touched his food. Neither had she. They're starting early today, she murmured, eyes scanning the room. Zach looked up. Who? She nodded toward the far end. A boy, maybe 12, stood slowly, left his tray untouched, and walked toward the back door. No one stopped him. He didn't look left or right, just drifted. Then another. A girl with long braids. Same distant expression. Same path. Amber stood. Come on. Stay low. Zach followed her out the side exit and into the woods, careful to keep pace without sound. The forest was brighter now, but not in a good way. The light flickered unnaturally through the leaves, catching on patches of bark like silver. Ahead, the campers were gathering. No talking, just forming quiet, perfect circles around individual trees. Each circle had 4, sometimes 5 campers, all kneeling, hands in laps or pressed to the soil, eyes open but blank. They were chanting, low, soft, words that didn't quite rhyme, but repeated enough to become rhythm. A route, a name, a path the same. Forget your face, become the flame. Over and over. The words didn't rise, didn't fall. They just cycled. One girl, tiny maybe 8, was digging into the dirt with her fingers. Fast, repetitive, like she was searching for something she'd buried and forgotten. Her nails were gone, her hands red with soil and scratches. Zach stepped forward. Amber caught his sleeve. Don't. They're too deep. Deep into what? Into the forest version, she said. These are stairs. The chanting didn't pause. Zach's skin prickled. How long have they been out here? Amber's voice dropped. Some of them came before we were born. That thought landed like a stone. They just stayed. They forgot how not to, Amber said. The forest doesn't always erase people. Sometimes it makes them comfortable. Zach looked closer. One camper had a pine needle sticking out from under their sleeve. Another skin was pale and veiny like old bark. He whispered, "Are they alive?" Amber didn't answer, because just then, one boy turned toward them, his face half in shadow. His mouth didn't move, but in Zach's own voice, he said, "Zachary Moreno, returned again." The boy didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't even seem to breathe, but he had spoken Zach's full name, without his mouth moving. Zach's body wanted to run, but his legs had locked. His breath caught in his throat like a trapped moth. Amber grabbed his arm. Back. Now. She pulled him behind the tree line, out of view of the chanting circles. Zach didn't fight her this time. They crouched low, the underbrush damp against their shins, pine needles digging through his hoodie. He whispered, "He knew me." Amber nodded slowly, eyes still on the clearing. "He didn't know you," she said. "Something through him did." Zach swallowed. "What are they?" "We call them the stairs," she said. "They're the ones who never left. Or maybe never tried. But why would anyone stay?" Amber looked at him. Because the forest doesn't just erase fear. It erases choice. If you forget you're supposed to leave, you won't. A pause. "Some of them got rewritten too many times," she went on. Every version of them blurred into the next. Names faded. Purpose faded. Until they were just placeholders. Zach turned to her. "And now the forest uses them. They're not people anymore. Not fully. They're feelers. Watchers. When you start to remember too much, they find you." Zach whispered, "Like immune cells." Amber raised an eyebrow. "Sure. But in this immune system, the infection is you." The wind picked up, rattling the leaves. The circles of chanting campers didn't even flinch. Zach peeked around the tree again. The boy who'd spoken his name had moved. But now, two other campers had turned their heads slightly toward where Zach had been standing. They didn't look curious. They looked activated. Amber pulled him back again. Tighter this time. "You're marked now." Zach's voice came out hollow. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "they'll be watching you more closely." A gust of wind moved through the branches, and for just a moment, Zach could have sworn the leaves themselves whispered. Zachary. The forest was full of whisper noise that night. Not bugs, not birds, just wind, soft and rhythmic, like the exhale of something huge lying still beneath the trees. Zach sat on the edge of his bunk, staring out the open cabin window. Jules was asleep behind him, back turned, breath steady, too steady. Zach hadn't said a word to him since lunch. He hadn't needed to. The thing pretending to be Jules had smiled too much, and not once had it asked why Zach was quiet. Something moved beyond the window. Slow, dragging. Zach stood, careful not to make the bunk creak, and stepped outside barefoot. The earth was cold beneath his feet. The figure ahead moved toward the lake, lopsided, hunched, but purposeful. It was a camper, one of the stairs. Zach followed at a distance, each step carefully placed between pine needles and stones. The figure moved with a kind of tired rhythm, shoulders twitching, arms swinging low. Its skin glistened weirdly in the moonlight. Closer now, Zach crouched behind a tree and watched. The camper, tall, thin, face obscured by matted hair, stopped beside a massive pine. Their arms shook slightly. Then they reached out and touched the bark. And the bark moved. Not much. Just a subtle ripple, like the trunk had shivered under their hand. The camper's fingers sink into it, just slightly. Not through. Not past it. Into. Zach's breath froze. The camper exhaled, deep and low, like relief. Their shoulders relaxed. Then their skin began to change. Up close it was cracked, gray. textured like dead when left in water too long. Faint moss crept along the wrist, disappearing under the sleeve. Their hand pushed deeper into the trunk, then the wrist, then the forearm. No struggle, no fear, just surrender. The tree accepted it, welcomed it. Zach stared, frozen. The camper leaned forward, resting their cheek against the bark. Eyelids fluttered. The tree pulsed faintly around them, glowing in places with veins of gold. Then, slowly, inch by inch, the camper merged. The tree took them in, not like a trap, like a grave that whispers lullabies. Zach backed away, too fast. A twig snapped beneath his heel. The tree stopped glowing. For a beat, the air held still. Then the bark where the camper had been pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and the forest exhaled his name. Zach didn't stop running until the trees thinned and the soft yellow glow of the cabins reappeared. The fog was rising again, thick and wet, curling around his ankles like something trying to hold him back. He slipped inside cabin 3 and shut the door behind him as quietly as he could. Jules didn't stir. Still on his side, still breathing evenly, still pretending not to be wrong. Zach crossed the room and sat on his bunk. His hands were shaking. He pulled out the journal, the one from the archive, the one that had once told him he'd escaped before. He opened to the last page, still blank. He turned back 5 pages, still blank. Whatever had written inside it, whoever he used to be, was gone again. He pressed his forehead to the page, willing something to appear. A name, a clue, anything. But the book stayed silent. Eventually, he lay back, exhaustion pulling at his arms, the afterimage of barkskin still floating behind his eyes. Then he felt it, a sharp pressure under his head. He sat up quickly and flipped his pillow. There, sitting on the sheet, was a sliver of wood. No, not just wood. It was carved, thin curved, the size of a finger, whittled at the edges with almost surgical care, and at the center, scorched in dark brown. An eye, perfect, open, watching. Zach turned it over in his fingers. It was warm to the touch, as if it had just been cut from something living. He looked at the window. The trees outside didn't move, but something in them hung. Low, steady, not a threat, not yet, just attention. Zach placed the sliver on his nightstand and sat up in bed, spine straight, heart refusing to settle. He opened the journal again, and on the back cover, carved, not written, deep enough to scratch the binding. How many times have you joined them? Chapter 8, The Forest's Mouth. The sliver sat in Zach's palm like a relic, thin, smooth. The carved eyes still stared without blinking. The grain of the wood shimmered faintly when the light caught it from the side, almost oily, like tree sap that remembered fire. Amber didn't touch it. She just looked, and when she did, her jaw tightened. That's not from around here, she said. Zach glanced at her. It was under my pillow. Her eyes flicked toward the cabin window. Then it's already watching you. Zach closed his fingers around the splinter, instinctively trying to hide it, though they both knew it didn't matter. Amber lowered her voice. It's from the trees near the mouth. Only they carve like that. The forest doesn't just see with them. It remembers through them. The mouth. Zach echoed. Amber nodded once. The place where the story starts. And stop. If we're right about the loop, if your journal was right, then that's where the forest edits reality. It's where your name goes if it wants you gone. Zach felt a cold sweat begin at his neck. It wants me gone? Amber gave him a look. You've seen too much. You've come back. Of course it does. He looked at the sliver again. So, what is this? She exhaled slowly. A tag. A tracker. A promise. A promise of what? That it's not finished with you yet. Zach sat back against the bunk wall. His fingers itched where they touched the wood. He didn't want to ask the next question, but it came out anyway. Can it change me? Like the others? If we wait too long, Amber said quietly, it won't have to. You'll change yourself, just to stay real. Zach looked out the window. The trees were still again. That terrible, perfect stillness. He asked, "Can we get to the mouth?" "We'll need to move fast," Amber said, "before it writes a new version of you." Zach stood, eyes set. "Then we go now." They barely made it to the edge of the camp clearing before he found them. "Hey!" Jules's voice rang out, too sharp to ignore. Zach and Amber froze. He jogged up to them, winded, flushed, eyes too bright. "You weren't gonna say goodbye?" Zach glanced at Amber. Her hand was already close to her pocket, where she kept the silver compass that didn't point north. "Just taking a walk," Zach said quickly. "Couldn't sleep." Jules smiled thinly. "In that direction? Isn't that where the weird trees are?" Amber tilted her head. "Which weird trees?" Jules looked between them, eyes flicking back and forth. "The ones that hump," he said slowly. "You know, with the poles. The names." Zach's blood ran cold. He hadn't told Jules about the poles. He hadn't told anyone. Amber's face didn't move, but Zach saw the shift in her posture. An inch backward, a slow breath in. Jules was still smiling, but now it looked borrowed. "I had a dream," he said. "Last night, I was standing in a circle of trees, and there was this hollow one in the middle. It was like a door, but it had teeth. The bark had names carved in it. And I heard you, Zach, your voice, inside the tree." He looked at Zach, and for just a second, the corners of his eyes twitched. "Sounded like you were asking me to let you out." Zach stepped back. Amber spoke gently. "That wasn't a dream, Jules." Jules blinked. "Huh, you weren't dreaming," she said. "You were remembering. Or something inside you was." Jules's jaw moved, like he was trying to respond, but couldn't find the right file. Zach said carefully, "Do you remember what you said? In the dream?" Jules blinked again. "No, just the voice. And the tree, the way it pulsed." He paused. Then, with too little hesitation, he added, "I think I should come with you." Amber stepped between them. "No." "Why not?" "Because you're not anchored," she said. "Not enough." Jules laughed. "Too loud. Too late." "Anchored? What?" "Like I'm a boat." But Zach could see it now. Something behind his friend's eyes. Not wrong. Just empty. Amber leaned close to Zach. Whispered. He's cracked. Could be halfway echo. Or worse, in between. Zach looked back at Jules. His friend was watching him too closely, like a mirror that hadn't decided what reflection it wanted. Jules smiled. "You're not gonna leave me out again, right?" Zach's throat tightened. "No," he said, but it didn't feel like a promise. The path beyond the main trails was older than any foot that had walked it. Amber moved fast, navigating instinctively, her compass useless now. The forest around them felt denser with every step, not darker, just closer. Leaves didn't rustle here. They pressed inward, heavy with watching. Zach clutched the journal in one hand, the ice splinter in the other. He could feel it now, not the wood, but the pull, like he was a needle and something massive beneath the earth was calling north. It was mid-afternoon, but the light had gone wrong. Amber slowed and pointed. There. Ahead, the trees parted, not messily like a clearing, but surgically. A perfect circle of open ground about 40 feet across. Trees formed the perimeter like sentries, tall and rigid, their bark the color of bone. Every single one had names carved into it. No initials, no nicknames, just full names burned deep into the wood. And at the center of the clearing stood a tree that wasn't a tree. It was too wide, too hollow, its bark twisted like folded skin, and its open trunk curved upward like a mouth mid-scream. Amber's voice dropped to a whisper, the mouth. Zach stepped forward, the air around him growing denser. His name was here, somewhere. He was sure of it. Each pole, because that's what they were, really not trees anymore, had dozens of names organized with frightening precision. Some were crossed out, Some had been carved over, layered. Others still glistened faintly, as if freshly branded. Zach approached one and touched it. It was warm. A low vibration moved through his fingertips, like a heartbeat. Amber came up beside him. This is where the forest remembers who belongs. If your name's here, it can bring you back, or keep you in place, or write a version of you that never asks questions. Zach stared at the central trunk, the mouth itself. It loomed taller than the others, its hollow center just large enough to crawl into. He took one step forward, then another. The air changed, sound warped, and then he heard it. From inside the tree, his own voice. I stayed behind that year. I never asked questions. I never opened the book. Zach froze. Another voice joined in, Amber's. You told me to burn your name. You begged me. So I did. The mouth whispered in their voices, but from inside itself. Not echoes. Alternatives. Versions of them that had already failed. Or stayed. Or accepted the rewrite. Zach turned back to Amber. She was staring at the mouth, jaw clenched. And now, faintly, she was hearing her own voice, too. Amber stepped away from the mouth and knelt at one of the outer poles. She pulled a small hooked knife from her jacket. I didn't bring this to defend myself, she said. It's for cutting names. Zach crouched beside her, watching as she pressed the blade to a name. ADA Lynn, then slid the edge just beneath the groove. The bark peeled like skin. The moment the last curve of the M lifted free, the air shifted. Amber jerked back, breathing hard. Her eyes fluttered. She swayed. Then, without warning, she screamed. Zach grabbed her, steadying her as she gasped, hands clutching her head. A moment passed, then another. Her breathing slowed. She looked up at him, eyes wet but wild with clarity. I remember her, she whispered. I remember all of her. Who? She was my first friend. First year. We followed the wrong trail. Found a house that wasn't on the map. There was something in the chimney. It whispered poems in our sleep. One night, it said it could offer Ada a second summer if she carved her name into a tooth. Amber shivered violently. She did. I didn't stop her. Zach stared at the strip of bark in Amber's hand. It still pulsed faintly. Will it work for me? He asked. Amber hesitated. It might, she said, but it hurts. And the forest punishes those who take names without offering one back. Zach stepped to a pole-marked session C/South line and scanned for his name. There it was. Zachary Moreno. Engraved neat. Final. He raised his trembling fingers to it. Carved. Slow. The bark gave easily. And then, everything came back. The camp on fire. The counselors screaming, not in pain, but in fury. Jules dragging Zach toward the river. Face cut, repeating, we have to make it to the gate. We have to make it. The ash falling like snow. The thing in the fire calling him by name and voice and birthday. The mouth, sealed shut, with Amber's voice on the other side, crying, don't forget me, Zach. Don't let them replace you. He collapsed to his knees, coughing hard. Amber was beside him again. It's not just memory, she said. It's a version. A draft the forest threw away. Zach clutched the bark like it might anchor him, and deep in the center trunk, the mouth sighed. A long, low rumble that rattled the clearing. The mouth pulsed now, visibly. Its hollow interior stretched and contracted like a throat preparing to speak. Zach stared at it, frozen. Amber was on her feet, holding the bark scrap like a blade. From the dark inside the mouth came a whisper. Zach, we missed you. Then Amber's voice, but soft, slow, sedated. We were so much happier when we forgot. Zach backed away. The voice changed again. Jules, laughing. Hey man, what if this time we just let it be fun? The voices layered, all familiar, all wrong. Amber hissed, don't answer. It needs your voice to make it real. The mouth split wider.
Inside, a faint golden light flickered, like a library lamp in the pit of a well. From that light emerged shapes, books. Not paper, not digital. These were wooden, slabs of name bark, bound with vine. Each one glowed faintly. Each one bore a name Zack almost recognized, like dreams forgotten seconds after waking. One book floated to the front. It opened, blank pages. Then words began to carve themselves, line by line, in dark ink. Zachary Moreno. Session G proposal. Summer of good weather. No dreams. No force. No hunger. No remembering. Campers. Jules. Amber. Zach. Duration. Forever. The bark voice whispered. Say yes. You'll be happy. We'll make it real. Amber shouted. Zach, don't. But something was pulling him forward. The words were warm in his head. The book smelled like comfort. Like marshmallows. Like stories with no bad endings. He reached toward it. Fingertips grazed the first line. And then he stopped. Because the moment his skin touched the page, he heard the other version of his voice whisper, almost pleading, if you say yes, you'll never know what they did to you. He snatched his hand back. The light flared. The mouth roared, not loud, but deep, a bass note in his chest cavity, rattling his bones. The bark around them began to tremble. Amber grabbed his wrist. Run. They turned. Behind them, the wooden books began to close. The mouth was closing too, but the voice followed them. One last, impossible whisper. Say yes, and you'll never doubt again.